Good morning, Detroit emerging leaders. Todd Phillips coming to you from the Power Studio. I get cheesier and cheesier with my intros every day, just like my hairstyle. It keeps getting, my forehead gets bigger and bigger. Here we go. This is us. Hopefully you see this on your screen. Motor Cities emerging leaders in commercial real estate. Hopefully we have the right date and time and you're joining us. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of these sponsors. Without you, we wouldn't be able to do pivoted to webinars and put the money into the technology and the time and the energy to make this all fun and lively, which is not really a replacement for getting together live, but this is what we got. Go vaccine. Let's get out of this thing so we can get back together. But anyway, thanks to all of these people. Lutz Financial Services. I'm gonna hack up some of these names. I really apologize. Cousino, CCIM, Rightsize, Bedrock, Building Community Value, Detroit, Plant Moran. Friedman and Corfac. We love you guys. Thank you for being a part of this and making these things happen. Love it. This is us, REjournals. If you don't follow us, you're in Michigan, probably most of you. We are in 17 states. We publish Midwest Real Estate News. We also publish Illinois Real Estate Journal, Minnesota Real Estate Journal, Red News in Texas, and a number of other things across the Midwest. We're in 17 states. We put on about 150 events a year live soon. We're going to have opening remarks here from Steven Siegel. Great speaker, young up and coming real estate. I'm not going to overuse adages, but I'm going to let you take it away, Stephen. I'll be here in the background if you need anything and holler, but take it away. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you, Todd, and hello all, and thank you for joining us for today's virtual event, REjournals Detroit Emerging Leaders in Commercial Real Estate. I'm Steve Siegel, and I'll be hosting our second panel. In today's event, we're going to hear from some of Detroit's leading young professionals in real estate. We're going to learn their thoughts on the market, the successes they've been a part of, and the risks they see in the future. We have a phenomenal lineup today of some of the best and brightest our real estate market has to offer. And I'm looking forward to seeing where these people end up in 10, 20, or 30 years, as our market is where some of the 20th and 21st century's great real estate minds came from. Names like Steve Ross, Dan Gilbert, Eli Broad, Sam Zell, Al Tubman, Bill Pulte, they all got their start in Michigan. I'm here on behalf of my firm, co-sponsor Q10 Lutz Financial Services, where I serve as director. Q10 Lutz is a multi-generational commercial mortgage banking firm led by Adam Lutz with deep relationships across the capital spectrum, including with banks, credit unions, life insurance companies, CMBS lenders, and more. We are part of the larger Q10 consortium that currently services $12 billion of real estate, and we have originated over $50 billion of capital since our founding. The hat I more commonly wear actually is as vice president of our sister firm, Lutz Real Estate Investments, which is a multi-generational owner-operator. I work directly with the principal to source development and value-add opportunities, and our newest property, the Albert Kahn, an apartment building in New Center, is coming online in March. So if you need an apartment, let me know. I'll put my capital markets hat back on for a second. While last year was a challenging year for obvious reasons, the increased liquidity in markets combined with pandemic-induced institutional investor fear drove treasuries down to all-time lows. As a result, if you own cash flow in real estate, particularly in multifamily, and you refinanced, you made out like a bandit. Rates today are still quite low. If you're doing agency debt, you're in the mid to high threes with 30-year amortizations. If you're doing a HUD loan for multifamily, you're in the mid to high twos with amortizations up to 40 years. Other types of real estate assets have been more difficult to finance, but markets still exist for them. For example, our firm has recently done several retail deals at 65% leverage. We also raised capital on the institutional equity side, and numerous new LP groups have popped up in the past year, particularly in the $2 to $20 million check range, which works quite well in Michigan. Their preferred returns are starting at around 8%, and yields coming down from an equity perspective suggest equity capital is starting to adjust their return expectations after years and years in this low interest rate environment. If discussing financing options is particularly interesting to you, or you're just a young person trying to learn about commercial real estate, feel free to contact me. And with that, I'll hand it back to Todd.
I'm just trying to take a mugshot for the Instagram here, and I can't figure it out. I'll get back to that. Okay. Hey, everybody. If you're on the first panel, now's the time to activate your camera and your microphone. I'll stall a little bit while we're doing that. Go back to Steven's picture here. There we go. Next up. This is a good question. How did you break into commercial real estate? I think everybody took a lot of different paths for this, but so I'm curious to hear that. I want to do another quick screen share though before we get started. We are doing continuing ed for this program. So I want to make sure everybody that's on, that's applied, that's wants CE credits, you got to stay on the whole time. So we track when you log on, we track when you log off. Don't be cheating because we'll know. Okay, this is our lobby. So presumably you got to this lobby here to get to this. You clicked on this watch event here thing, and that's how you're watching this. But I want to point out a couple quick things. One, some advertisements. This is our newspapers on here for REjournals and Midwest Real Estate News. Lots of news stories, but these panels. So if you notice, here's your panel coming up. You want to know a little bit more about them. There's a LinkedIn button below their name. If you can also connect with them on LinkedIn. So I always do that. Every event I do now, I go through here, click on LinkedIn, connect with everybody I can, because look, it's the best we can do. We can't be live, but we can do at least some social networking or networking of some sort. So I appreciate that, paying attention to that. Are you gentlemen all ready to go?
Yep.
All right. Well, it's all yours. Take it away. If you need anything, just holler, hey, Todd. I'll be here in the background. I'm just going to turn my camera off.
Thanks, Todd. Hi, everybody. My name is Blair Gould. I'll be the moderator for this morning's panel. We have three speakers, Nick Weise, VP and Principal at Rightsize Facility, Andrew Sherman, Senior Development Director at the platform, and John McGraw, Director of Development at River Caddis. We'd like the panel to be as interactive as possible. I'd like maybe like the last 15, 20 minutes to be open Q&A, but feel free to interrupt or type any questions that you have in the chat and we'll try to address them. But let's get started. So Nick, Andrew, and John, if you can each maybe give a little introduction about who you are, your current roles, and why you've chosen commercial real estate in Michigan, Southeast Michigan in particular. So whoever wants to go first, or Andrew, if you want to go alphabetical, I can start with you.
Great, sure, I would love to. Yeah, Andrew Sherman. I work with the platform, a real estate development company in downtown Detroit, based out of the Fisher Building. Senior development manager at the platform. So currently my role includes really acting as the developer on the projects that I manage. Right now within the platform, I've completed our 6001 CAS project in the Techtown area of Detroit, working through completing our Chroma project in Milwaukee Junction in Detroit, and a few others that are currently in development. I've been with the platform since late 2016, so a little over 4 years now. Quite a fun time to be doing development in Detroit. At the platform, it's really special. We get to really kind of work and play in the area that we do our developments, right in the New Center, or at least greater New Center area in Detroit. I really fell in love with real estate. I think as a young kid, unknowingly, just in love with downtown Birmingham growing up, and actually Somerset Mall, I think, is where I really learned to love real estate, knowing where every single store was within the Somerset Mall in my head. Went to Philly for college, fell in love with that city, and then moved to Chicago and fell in love further with the city of Chicago. And so when I moved back to Detroit with my wife in 2014, I went and got my master's and kind of dove head into real estate after kind of avoiding it for some time. So being able to kind of be a part of the redevelopment of downtown Detroit and further continued development of the city is really special and awesome for me.
Thanks, Andrew. John, you want to touch base on that?
Yeah, great. Nice to meet you guys, and thanks for having me. John McGraw, Rivercast Development. My role here is Director of Development by title, but we're a small outfit, family firm based out of East Lansing. My father started the company in 2008, brought me on in 2012. Since then, we've developed in 7 different states, and looking in numerous other ones. It's funny how life works when you focus in other places, and then something like COVID happens and redirects your energy back to your hometown. It's really opened our eyes to all of the unique resources our state has. So it's been really fun to dive in, meet people like yourselves on this panel, and kind of go forward. I started off my real estate journey in commercial brokerage and Portage, went to college in Grand Rapids, and then moved back. So, this being a family company, my father's been in real estate in some form or another since before 2000. So I kind of grew up in it. It's been really easy for me to just dream the dreams, look at the sky. What can't we do? So it's a passion. It's a vocation. It's what keeps me up at night. It's what I think about when I walk around. It's what I want to teach my kids. It's everything.
Thanks, John. Nick?
Good morning. Nick Weise, Rightsize Facility. Like John and Andrew, I share a passion for this industry and this world with them. Not many little kids grow up in Detroit knowing who Albert Kahn is and loving the architecture of the city and spending a lot of time down there. Somehow I managed to end up in the study of engineering and biology in college, but shortly after leaving Ann Arbor, realized that the monotony of engineering wasn't for me and found my way into this world, creating workspaces and helping, commercial tenants achieve their dreams, which I absolutely love. It kind of blends my technical background of engineering, the biology side of things, the human-centric component of all that we do, and then my art and architecture geek background that kind of drives me. So, when I left Ann Arbor in the early 2000s, all my friends were going to New York and Chicago, and I really wanted to stay in Detroit and see what I could do here and kind of. I saw the potential of the city, and when we got the Super Bowl in 2005, and then people started talking about the city more and coming down here, and then in 2010, Dan actually did it, and things just completely started to snowball from there, and so I'm glad I stayed. It paid off, and I'm really enjoying just being a part of this rebirth of the city. There's so much happening here, and helping tenants grow from 2 or 20 people to 200 or 2,000 over the course of my career has been incredibly rewarding and fascinating to see, and something that's kind of unique to Detroit in the way that we're able to get people started with lower barriers to entry, all right, for success. And it's been absolutely a blast. I left the Herman Miller dealer in Detroit to partner with Mason Autry, who founded Rightsize, and bring that business model here 5.5 years ago. And spending a lot of time here and in our Chicago offices and serving clients nationwide. And we've serviced over 50,000 projects. And it's just it's neat seeing what's happening in our local area, and then doing the same thing for people around the country. And it always comes back to Detroit. There's something special about what's happening here, and it's really cool to see. A lot of us do a lot of work around the country, and I think we always gravitate back to this area, and it's just an absolute blast helping tenants achieve their dreams, and we work hand in hand with the commercial real estate industry to make that happen, and truly partner with them and with the clients to make things happen. So excited to be a part of this morning with you guys, and looking forward to talking more about how we do what we do.
Thanks a lot, Nick. So I think each of you guys touched on it a little bit, but what are some advantages do you think in your personal experience to being in Detroit, Midwest market, but specifically Detroit, to your growth as a young professional? Andrew, if you want to take it first.
Yeah, I mean, Detroit, I mean, growing up in suburban Detroit, it's everything. What a community to be able to learn about real estate. And I think Steve and really kind of listed the names of kind of the people who've come before you. That's always a great heritage. I mean, Nick talks about the architecture, those kind of just living in the city with that kind of tradition, but then the community itself. The real estate community in Detroit is a tight-knit community, one that is always encouraging others to jump in and come along really on the journey. It's a place for collaboration and for teamwork and for mentoring young individuals, which I've found to be just extremely beneficial in my growth within the industry. So I think I haven't worked in many other places, so it's hard to say, okay, this is this and this is that, but I've talked to a lot of people, and I think the community here is just really, really different, really special. And you can be a small fish in a big pond and a big fish in a big pond and feel kind of all those different things at the same time within the city of Detroit. And furthermore, I think my opportunity at the platform and being focused right now in the city of Detroit, and just all of the momentum and excitement surrounding that city, and the opportunity to really kind of connect the dots to a city that went through a lot and can be built and continue to build upon the lessons that have been learned and done in the right way. So Detroit's kind of everything to me. It's a special place to be.
I second that. That's exactly how I feel. You mentioned big fish in a small pond. Jeanette Pierce with Detroit Experience Factory says all the time that Detroit's big enough to matter in the world, but small enough for you to matter in it. And it really kind of highlights the sense of community and the ability for people coming up in this industry to approach people who are veterans and movers and shakers and still get reactions and get mentorship. And there's a level of community and support that you don't see in some of the larger cities. There's a disconnect between the movers and shakers and the people coming up. So that sense of help and an ability to outreach, and that barrier to entry is a little bit more approachable. So it's nice to see that in a city like this. And then the architecture, of course, as we talked about, we lament the economic downturn and the exodus from Detroit, but it also gave us some incredible buildings that would not be here if we had continued to grow. So being able to see the upcycling of these incredible architectural masterpieces is really fun, and putting some tech firms and law firms and every kind of company into these gems and seeing them just as relevant today as they were 100 years ago is really, really cool.
You guys both touched on it. For me, it's the community. The community is what drives my passion, but it's also what drives the passion in Detroit. It's created a movement, and it's grown, and it keeps growing and growing and growing. In our business, while it's architecture and while it's buildings and while it's tenants, it's people. And the people are what create the community, and the community is what drives all of this. And this is what makes me so excited about not just Detroit, but Michigan in general. And I'm just, it's a super exciting place.
Thanks, guys. I think with each of you being in Detroit, John, I know that your company is a little bit more active nationwide, but are there certain trends, industry trends that you see going forward, specific to Detroit and the Midwest, and also potential changes and going forward in a post-COVID environment, what you see those trends maybe developing into?
Yeah, I guess I can start off with this one if you guys don't mind. So, developing in multiple different large cities and other places across the nation, and looking at Detroit, it's impossible for me to be the 5-foot guy. It's easier for me to be the 10,000-foot guy. So trends, what we're seeing across Michigan and Detroit, you guys all know this from what I've seen: a big push in innovation, a big push in transportation, a big push in infrastructure, in affordable housing, and a big push in industrial, manufacturing, logistics, and distribution. All of those things are they're moving. People, it's a crazy time, but people are still working. People are still excited and still passionate, still ready to work. So, there's each one of us can find something to do in those areas, in those industries. There's a lot going on.
Absolutely. There's a bit of a shift there, but things are still happening. We finished 2020 with more people on our team than we started it. So, it was a rough year for everybody, but we saw the opportunities and pivoted more to pre-owned furniture than new, and more to decommissioning spaces and helping companies consolidate or move out of the high-rise towers into a single tenant building just during this period to avoid the elevators. So, things still happened in 2020 and they're still happening now. It's been actually a really busy start to the year. So, that shift that we're seeing in the industry to industrial is keeping everybody busy just in different areas. But then, tech's growing and, automation and all of those, industries that support it are still growing. So we're seeing things happen in Ann Arbor and in Detroit to support that. And, we're not Silicon Valley yet, but we've got an incredible amount of talent and startups that are coming out of this. And people had the time in 2020 to create new innovations. So we've got a lot of people occupying co-working spaces with their ideas, and hopefully we'll see those companies turn into unicorns as well. So the energy is exciting coming out of this, and we're seeing a desire for a turnkey solution, right? Those companies that are growing and taking space for the first time or busting at the seams in their current one no longer want a transactional support team. They want somebody that can hold their hand through the process and really be a consultant. And it's something you see in other cities where firms are creating that support team within. In Detroit, a couple of firms have adapted to that, but the ones that really get it are providing their tenants and their clients with the entire team that they need to make things happen. And you're seeing fewer of those big, open, cold, impersonal bids and more of those, here's a team, or here are a couple people, talk to them, pick one, and then let's move forward with a team and really create an amazing space or an amazing building that is built through a partnership. And there's a lot of that going on, a lot of collaboration, a lot of partnership.
I think first of all, we're just at the beginning in terms of what we're about to see in terms of change. I think this is a big kick in the butt to adoption and getting out of people's ruts. At least I'm seeing that on a personal level. Just the kind of technology proliferating through our society more quickly, I think is going to continue to happen. But I think for the real estate world, we're focused on the urban environment. So understanding how people begin to work with their urban environment, how they go through their lives, going to the office maybe less than before, what sort of space do they need at home? Do they need more office space? Do they need an office nook? What are these little things that might change? Also, are we bringing co-working closer to home? So there's another maybe shared office space, these kind of amenities that were different. But then I think about the actual spaces, the offices of the future. I put up behind us the second floor of our 6001 Cass building downtown, which has got 22-foot high ceilings, plaster, beautiful detailed plaster, restored marble. It was actually a Cadillac dealership back in 1920 when it was built. But I think it's a special space. And I think companies will continue to gravitate towards special places and places that bring people together under this kind of more collective and experiential experience. And I think it's those special places that'll continue to hold their value and become more sought after in our kind of new age of office use.
Thanks, guys. So along those same lines, have you found certain programs or certifications or just personal experiences that you found beneficial to your development in your role and in light of these future innovations coming in a post-COVID world, or even what's in demand or who you're looking to hire at your respective companies to address new and arising needs? Andrew, do you want to start?
I'm maybe going to pass that off to one of my other two panelists while I think about it.
Sure.
I can shout something off.
Okay.
You know, whether it's, you know, I really, for me personally, find it important to just continue to grow, continue to learn, evolve, to know what I don't know and just keep pushing. You know, whether that's my own insecurity or not, who knows? But yeah, in my kind of upbringing, just I've been in what felt like the wrong rooms, you know, or the dumbest person in the room. And all that did was get me to keep pushing. You know, how can I set myself up better for the future? So I went and I've done, I've got my CPM training or designation for property management, for CCIM designation, which I would suggest to anybody. We've got a wonderful Michigan chapter here of incredible people, super sharp. And CCIM is a brother and sisterhood of real estate investment folks that, you know, you jump in and everybody wants to work with each other. It's that community. It's what I've always looked for, and a bunch of different other things. So just, you know, when you talk about bringing people in, you want people that want to grow. You know, I want to be with people that don't want to search for comfort. I want them to be uncomfortable. I want to push. I want to, you know, find out our weaknesses and attack them and work on them. You know, it's more fun. It's harder. But as soon as you get done with it, you realize it wasn't that big of a deal.
Love that. Yeah. Surrounding yourself with a team of people that are passionate about what you do and constantly willing to grow is paramount. And our team, you know, I'm excited with all of the continued learning that they did in 2020. You know, that lack of a commute and that extra time without any networking events or partying or going out or doing anything really made for a ton of time for designers to get certified as NCIDQ and for you know, salespeople to join SMPS training and you know, all the workplace wellness training that happened. You know, groups like Crew and IREM and BOMA, all of these, and CCIM, of course, you know, continued to have these learning seminars and modules and training. And I don't think there was any shortage of Zoom webinars to join in 2020. So the amount of learning that's at everybody's fingertips really increased in the last year. So getting involved in one of those organizations that John and I just talked about and really diving in head first and joining all of the training and getting every certification you can really helps you advance in this world and just being the smartest person in the room about what you do. You don't have to know everything, but when people look to you for your portion of the project, you want to know what you're talking about, and whether that's workplace wellness or sustainability or you know, or construction or electrical or IT, you know, you want to make sure that you're up on the latest trends, and those trends have changed a little bit in the last 12 to 18 months. So knowing what's going on is crucial, and all of those organizations are really good at staying on top of that and helping people with that continuing education.
Yeah, I actually think more about our company's growth in terms of communication. I think we've had a great experience having the opportunity to get people together more often via Zoom meetings. People are available because they're not traveling as much. They can, it just seems communication in general is more easily schedulable. The understanding of people being remote on a phone, even using, you know, their phone's video from doctor's offices or places they might be visiting, just really kind of being there no matter what, not taking the 9 to 5 and being more flexible in general, I think has allowed our team to grow tighter in our communication. We just pick up the phone and call each other. We're not necessarily using excuses of waiting for someone to finish a meeting because you see them. So we've seen a lot of growth in that regard and getting communication much more streamlined and getting people on the same page. And And I think personally, there's a lot of growth that I've been able to have just by learning about myself over the past 9 months, working from home in an environment where you've got to push yourself. At least in our situation, we've really been remote since March. And while I'm doing development and getting downtown to my buildings, I even got to see Nick at one of my buildings, just a couple weeks ago. So I'm getting out there and still seeing people, but I'm more focused and learning what I'm good at and what I'm bad at, and working on myself. I always feel ends up improving those around me. They then know how to deal with me better. I'm more upfront, and I make their lives easier, and they make mine. So we've seen a lot of growth, I think, just individually in our team and as a group. So it's been one really big positive of COVID for us.
Thanks, guys. We have our first question. With more people working from home, do you expect to see more people living further from work, perhaps slowing the rapid growth of multifamily office and retail in urban areas?
Well, I think it's certainly a possibility. At the same token, you might see people working. You just might see different overall working experiences in general. I think in our situation where nobody's downtown during the day, in terms of creating a very vibrant atmosphere, you're just not having people who want to live downtown. But if people are still going out and living nightlife and going to restaurants, whether or not they're going to the office as many days might not be as important as you think. And it actually might be the neighborhood they live in, the people they're around. What's the atmosphere like? They might want a closer, tight-knit community, whereas in a suburban environment, you're much more isolated and you're not interacting as much. So I think it's really, it's too early to tell a lot of those things just because of the situation these changes have come under. However, I'm super interested, and instead of, I think, going into it wanting one thing to happen or another, which I think sometimes as a developer you can do because you have an idea of what you want, I think being open and just watching it adjust and listening to others is kind of the key. So with that in mind, I'll turn it over to my panelists and hear what they have to say.
Yeah, I think I would agree with a lot of things that you said. I also would add, it's really going to depend on the municipalities, really what's driving it. We've become a convenience culture. So whoever's going to get there first, people are going to establish some roots. I do think it's too early to say, hey, people are just going to start leaving and moving out to suburban areas. But I do think that some suburban areas are going to do much better than others. And it's all going to depend on leadership. It's all going to depend on the grand vision of what's going on. But that also goes for urban areas too. I mean, if you've got good leadership, pushing good initiatives, thriving off of community and people, I mean, that's where this is at. We've spent far too much time away from each other. We want to be next to each other. We want to talk. We want to see our friends. We want to have dinners. We want to see movies. We want to see these things so badly. So.
Yeah, I think you guys both hit the nail on the head. Some portion of businesses and some portion of teams within businesses are going to continue to remain remote, but it's going to be the minority. People are craving that interaction again. Business owners are dying to have their teams back into the space so they can collaborate in person and continue to grow. So certain companies will thrive with more remote workers. Others, can't wait to get back to a face-to-face interaction of some type, whether it's a hybrid or some sort of, partial days on, days off. But, you might have a couple people in a household that both can work, in an IT setting remote the entire time, and they might go off to the suburbs and, raise their chickens and things like that. But, I think, the three of us share the sentiment that we want to get back into the heart of things. And so people like us are going to continue to be engaged in urban environments. And I think you'll still see developments moving forward where it's a lot of, live, work, and play in the same building or the same development. And I don't think those are going to go away. They might have slowed down for a year or so, but things like that are still going to happen.
Thanks, Nick. I think you've all at least mentioned it in different answers and discussion, but you know, how have you guys stayed motivated day to day with kind of the groundhog type days that we're having lately to you know, to get things done each day, and then have your companies provided support, or what have you guys found to be successful ways of doing that?
We made sure that everybody was working comfortably. That was the key. You know, it's hard to be healthy and productive working from your dining room table. So the first thing we did was make sure everybody had a full setup, just like we have at the office, with, you know, a desk and a task chair and monitor arm and all the technological support that they needed with, you know, computers and keyboards and things like that. So, and extra monitors. You know, working from home should be just as comfortable as working from the office, especially when it's a permanent situation, or at least, you know, for 8 months or so. So that was number one. You know, encouraging everybody to get up and take a shower and get dressed. You know, this isn't far off from what I wear every day, even if I'm not going anywhere. So maybe without the bow tie, but you know, it's important to feel like you're at work when you're working from home, so that you have that same level of energy. And then just keeping people engaged. We've used Zoom and we've used Microsoft Teams across all platforms, and the team is just really engaged, constantly communicating, and you know, just that feeling that you're supported, not only in the furniture that you take home to work in, but that people are there to answer questions. Leadership is available, and you know, those things are crucial in keeping people productive and working in a happy, healthy way when you can't control the environment.
Yeah, I think it's hard. It's been hard for me from day one. Not fair to say though. I had a child on April 2nd, so you know, I jumped right in with kind of the combo work from home. You know, taking care of kids. I have 2 young ones as well, so you know, it's been learning. It's been a learning experience. But I'm also an extremely social person, and I've always thrived off the energy of all the people around me, and without that, I've struggled, I think, at the beginning. So learning, okay, what should I do to kind of get my fix of that, to kind of get my motivation going? You know, scheduling calls with people I know who get me excited, or, you know, bring out a lot of passion early in the morning, tend to do that. So, you know, people I know, I might be calling them early to kind of get my kind of juices flowing in that regard, because I'm not around people and that sort of thing. But you know, I think for in general, it's been a learning experience, and I've taken it as that, and kind of enjoyed it. I feel like it's been a period of growth for myself, and you know, also a period to get to know your team members. You know, reach out to them individually and call them and talk to them about other things, and show, you know, really kind of learn what they're going through. And everybody's going through different struggles, I think, during this time. So showing that empathy and understanding gets people to have a rapport with each other and really trust each other and want to build and work together. And I think that's the key to great organizations.
And for me, it's a little bit different. You know, I work in a family company here, so there's not a lot of people here for one, but everybody else stayed home. So I had the entire office and then a string full of retail all empty. So I had an entire building to myself for months. And the only reason I came in instead of stayed home, because I also have 2 little kids, and, you know, you don't want to get hit by a wet diaper, right? Which happened. But either way, you know, these times are tough. Andrew, you brought it up in a couple of different questions, but really this thing, I mean, it revolves around discipline. If you love what you do, it's a lot easier to wake up and try to push and try to go out and talk to people, fight through the difficult times. And if you don't, you know, it's easier to just come up with excuses why not to do things. So the passion that we can carry within our organization, within ourselves, to push through. So, you know, very similar to working out. It's a lot easier to work out with a group of people and bask in that misery together than it is to, you know, try to do 100 push-ups by yourself and then not quit at 10, because you don't want to do it anymore. So, you know, a lot of it's discipline. A lot of it's just trying to find out how you change, how you adapt, how you evolve.
Thanks, guys. We have another question. How has the cost of construction affected your new ground up projects? And I guess has COVID caused any delays or impacted any upcoming projects or things in the pipeline?
We've actually been able to, we had a project we've been working on for, or our partners have been working on for many years, but called Woodward West, right downtown Detroit, just south of Mac on the west side of Woodward. And we had slated that for, I think it was an August or September closing and construction commencement. And when COVID hit in March, we stuck true to that and continued to work with our partners to raise the equity needed and close the financing. Of course, there were, you know, extra hoops and hurdles and things to discuss, but at the end of the day, we ended up getting that closed and construction began. And it's really awesome to be able to watch, you know, now from your remote camera here, you know, the construction happening that commenced during kind of this pandemic. So we found that our lenders were able to see, you know, past the horizon of COVID, and that was really great and exciting for us, and definitely put some juice in our step in terms of working on our next deals. So that's something we're really proud of on our team, of getting that going and you know, happening on the ground.
You know, in terms of for us, we had a project going in downtown Boise, Idaho. Boise or Idaho never closed down for construction, so that process continued to go through. Construction costs, they varied. Some went up substantially and some went down. And because of that, you know, taking a positive look or a different perspective, it says, okay, well, maybe we change the product type. You know, maybe we change the type of construction. Maybe we go from wood to precast and we add more floors. You know, what are we doing today that we could change in the future? How can we be more innovative with what we have instead of going in with a prototype? So there's, you know, while it's been challenging, it also opens us up to stop thinking one way in a myopic view. How do we open this back up and be innovative? And you know, it actually becomes more fun. You get a chance to learn. You get a chance to make new relationships with folks doing different and cool things. The other part that was challenging during this time was, you know, if you had anything going through municipalities and entitlements, you know, the municipalities, just like businesses, have struggled immensely all across the nation, and especially in Michigan. You know, they had, imagine taking an entire staff and switching them over to a digital platform and then doing that through you know, the Open Act, right? So everything's been challenging. It gets pushed back. We've had 3 to 5 projects either completely fall on their face or just completely stall, just because the fact of the matter of where we were during that time. And it is what it is. You know, the world is not perfect, and I can't wait for it to be. So.
You're right that it's led to innovation and some creative overcoming of obstacles, and so we see the after effects of some of those challenges. So you know, construction budget goes up, timeline gets extended, and we end up having to come in and be heroes in some cases, where they come to us and say, we can't afford the furniture we were going with. We need to look at something a little more competitive or pre-owned option. So it's allowed us to shine in those instances, but it's also created an opening for some architectural products in our industry that can help them keep costs down or pivot some of the construction costs into the furniture which is a tax benefit for depreciation, and then also allows them to finance it with the furniture rather than in the initial construction budget. So demountable walls and things like that, and using furniture to divide spaces to cut down on some of the carpentry and glazing has been a thing for a while now, but it's really come to the point where those things are no longer more expensive than construction, and they're a lot faster and have financial benefits. So we're seeing the after effects of that, not only in finding more creative ways to save money on furniture and to finance it, but to pull some of those construction costs out of those trades and bring them into our world, which has been kind of fun.
Thanks, guys. How have you guys seen, or how do you expect buildings, workspaces to stay relevant long term, and maybe specifically, what types of projects have you guys seen be either more in demand from a lender side of things, or from your investors or owners? Have there been already changes in demand that you've seen?
I think we've seen some changes in demand. People looking for outdoor space is kind of a simple one that seemed to proliferate early. The office space I mentioned, office space amenity within the building. From a residential standpoint, I think those things are easy to understand. You're home more, you need a place to be able to get out and breathe and that sort of thing. So I think that's always been one I think that differentiates a product and will continue to. And if you're not able to create, balconies on your apartments, where are you putting them in terms of where are you getting them outdoor space, or how are they accessing outdoor space? How are they accessing parks? What is their walking environment like? I think all those things just become so much more important than before, just because you're spending a bulk of your time, you're there during the day as opposed to not. Other trends. I always say it again. It's all going to be about watching. We're just about to have our kind of rebirth into society with the vaccines that are happening. So seeing how different companies, which we really see June as kind of being okay, people will be back to work, at least in my eyes. And then watching from there, because I think that next 6 months will be much more telling than the past 6 months, where you just have people waiting to kind of get to the next step and pushing off costs and pushing off needs as they kind of ready themselves to, take hold in a new office space and a new built-in environment.
Yeah, we've seen kind of a common theme across the country that landlords are stepping up and either developing buildings or creating spaces within and around buildings that have infrastructure and incorporate wellness, safety, productivity, and those that are trying to sell and lease out what is basically just a concrete box in a void without those things are going to be at a disadvantage. So people that are thinking about the flexibility of space, and like Andrew said, that whether it's a residential multifamily development or an office development, those outdoor spaces where people can feel comfortable outside having meetings for a while, or just getting outside, because we've kind of created this need for that and pattern of going outside and enjoying the fresh air and kind of meditating on these walks and realizing that it might be a little safer to meet outside for a long time. Those are going to be an important part. So landlords and developers that see that the future of work is in flexibility and those amenities that make people feel comfortable, safe, and productive are going to be key.
I totally agree. From the landlord perspective, versatility, flexibility are incredibly important. It's where people are going to want to go. We don't need, for tenants or residents, we're not going to, as a landlord, know what everybody needs, right? But we're going to try to cater to the most amount of people to provide that space. And not only, we have design standards that we can use for buildings, but they've also come out with other standards that are not just for sustainability, but they're for wellness and creating buildings that are not just safe, but they're healthier. They're more focused on the people within it, so that, while we need to have a huge focus on public programming and getting people outside and the amenity of that, we also want them to be safe inside, because they're going to spend a ton of time in there. We want, flushable air systems and if there's contaminants that come in, that they can be traced or at least eliminated right away. And how do we do that? And there's folks across the country that have been working on this nonstop, and they've been doing it before this was even happening. So those design implementations and integrations into new systems and larger systems and larger buildings where people want to come in and have a safe place to work, because it's where you spend most of your time. If you're there 8, 12 hours a day, you want to be breathing in clean air. And most of us just kind of go with the flow. No pun intended.
So, I think a large part of those things would be engaging your community. And, if you guys could each touch on what role community engagement plays in your day-to-day jobs, and how do you do it in today's environment efficiently and adequately?
I think community engagement is, working especially in a city like Detroit, where you've got racial tension and history over a really long period of time. And you've got communities that have been there for forever, who have endured a lot of change and in some instances, a lot of hardship. And you've got new residents coming in, living alongside them, and how are they interacting? How are they going about their day-to-day lives in their community? As a developer, I think we need to understand who the players are, what it's like on all sides, what it's like to feel the way that they feel. And I think the only way to do that is by getting to know people and getting out there and meeting them, going to events, going to neighborhood events, showing your face, and really just being honest and open about what you can and can't do, how economics of deals work and how they don't work. And being there to say that up front and show that you can come back over and over again and do what you say, and not promise things that you don't, is the key. But, in reality, when you're developing in a community, unless you're living there, you're just coming alongside that community. And if you look at it in any other way, do you try to be the community or you try to impose something, you're not doing it right. And I think that's important to remember. And knowing the people is the only way. There's just no other way. So making those relationships firsthand, having someone in your team that makes them, and then making sure that you're reaching out and being consistent is the key. And we found ways to do that during the pandemic. I've met with numerous community members over Zoom. I've met them at the buildings. I've done tours. People wear masks. So anyone who says that it's not possible, just let me know. I can help you through talking to people. But that's what I love to do. So I love that part of the business, honestly. And I love being told when you're wrong, because as a developer, you're wrong a lot of the time. And understanding that is the big key, I think, in life and in development and in growth. And, as an emerging leader on this panel, or wow, that's a nice thing to be able to be told. It's about continuing to grow because you're still emerging. So we've not emerged yet.
And you make a good transition there from engaging community as you're developing buildings, but also to being part of the community as you're growing within the industry, right? So, knowing who to reach out to and what organizations to be a part of, not just within our industry, but in the community, and staying involved to better the community, especially in a city like Detroit, being a part of nonprofits and charitable groups and getting your hands dirty once in a while. Those are the relationships that are going to help you grow. We support the commercial real estate community tremendously, and it's been the largest source of partnerships and projects. But equally as important to the growth of my career and to our business has been our involvement in the community and with different social organizations and charitable organizations, and being that go-to person as a consultant and a solutions provider within your community is going to help you break into the business and grow your network. So, being that go-to broker, that go-to developer, that go-to GC or architect within your social setting, and being a trusted member of the community that gets involved and gives back and builds people up around you is a huge component to building your business and being a trusted member of the real estate community, but just the community as a whole. So as you break into the business, make sure that you're out there and involved and bringing people up. Early on in your career, it's hard to bring people up in your industry. So do it in the community. Get involved, join a board, join a young professionals board, like a Founders Junior Council or a Leaders for Kids kind of thing. So, give back, and those returns will come back to you in spades over the course of your career.
Yeah, I think that servant leadership is one of the most important things that we can do as people. Whether you do it for karma or whatever you do it for, if you're able to do it, you're still helping somebody else. And that's what we're called to do. We're called to help our neighbor we've all been given gifts. What can we use those gifts for to help others? How can we create that great impact? I have the unique and fortunate ability to travel around and really not develop where I live, which provides a unique position because I'm not from any of these places. So for me to go in and tell people what they should have and how it should look and why it should be this way, and you should listen to me because I know what I'm talking about, is irresponsible, and it'll make my job harder. So the community engagement is critical. It's absolutely critical from all directions. Andrew, you touched on very good points. As much as you can engage as possible, you're going to get a lot of information at the very least. Some of it you might even be able to use. But at the end of the day, you're listening, and people need to be heard. It's not good when you go into a community and people talk to you and you just ignore it, or they try to talk to you and you don't take the time. It's going to make things harder for the developer or for the contractor, for anything else. So, if you can take your time and engage and learn and grow with the community and do things that, they already have the substance there, and grow up, use the foundation that they've built to enhance the community, to stimulate the economy that's already there. That's our goal.
Thanks, guys. So given the title of our panel is How Did You Break Into Commercial Real Estate? Can each of you kind of touch on some advice, whether it's general or specific, that you'd give to somebody coming out of school or transitioning from a different industry into commercial real estate that you found beneficial or you think would be beneficial going forward?
I always
Go ahead. No, please.
Go ahead, Nick. You win.
I would
in first.
I would say be curious and add value. Those would be the focus for me as you're getting into any industry, but reaching out to those who have done it before and are successful, and asking questions and being the old adage of 2 ears and 1 mouth, and use them in that proportion. Listen to what they have to say, and build your success on what they've learned from their successes and failures, because you're going to grow from your failures. But if you can learn from the failures of 20 other mentors, then you're going to grow that much faster. So listening to their story and their advice, and reaching out and being vulnerable and admitting that you want to learn and that you don't know everything is going to open you up to all kinds of mentorship and advice. So reaching out to those people that you deem successful, or that you want to get to know better, or that you want to emulate in your career. And people love to talk about themselves. So, allowing them the opportunity to tell you how they did it is going to help you grow. And that's going to absolutely help you. And then add value. Once you learn some of these things, be open to helping everyone in your company, in your community, in your industry, whether that's getting involved with some of the organizations that we've mentioned, like CCIM and IRM and CREW and BOMA, joining a committee, being a servant to that organization and to your industry is going to endear you to others, and open you up to all kinds of opportunities. So be curious and add value.
So I would say I would agree, first of all, with everything Nick said. There's just so many ways to get involved. There's so many people to reach out to. There's so many ears to listen to. But I find it funny that real estate's the only business. I mean, sports, obviously people watch, but it's the only one where everybody's in. Everybody is in real estate of some sort. You know, whether you're in your house or wherever you're standing, it's a part of the business. And then everyone probably is already doing some sort of real estate transaction, whether it's renting a house, buying a house. You know, you're probably already in the business in some way. So, you know, get curious, like Nick said, about what you're already looking at and what you like. What do you like interacting with? Find a community in a city that you're in love with and get to know every piece of it, every part of it, and every business, how long they've been there, who's there, why people like to be there. And the more you just think about that, the more you just find where you're excited and what really makes you passionate. And then you'll find out who's a leader in that area, and things will happen naturally. But just following it and always going the next step and making yourself be uncomfortable, feeling uncomfortable, you're doing it right. I think, John, you said that earlier. If you are scared to make a phone call, make the call. If you're scared to ask the question, ask the question. If you're scared about anything, you know, just that's the right way. So I think that's the easiest advice, but maybe the hardest to follow.
I could use what you both said. So just so I say something here quickly. I would just add, we have a culture of people looking for shortcuts, looking for the easy way of low-hanging fruit, and there isn't one. So if you found it, you're on the wrong path. It's just going to take you longer in the long run. So if you can try to make things more simple and not easy, and work hard, and just keep going out, networking to as much as you can. I was going to say something else, but I forgot. So it looks like we got 1 minute. So thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Andrew, Nick, and John for joining us. I'll throw it back to Todd to go back to the general group.
I really appreciate the advice. I need to follow some of that. You know, we used to tell people, go to a live event if you want to meet new people and grow your business. Hopefully we get back to that, right? Okay, gentlemen, thank you. Great panel. Really appreciate all that. It's going to be up on YouTube, so you can show off to your friends soon. Probably, I hired a guy to help me cut video, and it might cut my time down, but it'll still be probably next week before I get it up. Everybody that's on the next panel, hit your camera and microphone button. I'm going to do a little screen share again, introduce this panel. This is my weekly comedy routine. Watch the old guy try to work screen share on Zoom. So this next panel, Motor Cities Emerging Leaders on Emerging Trends. I think we talked about quite a bit of that in that last panel, but I got to bet there's quite a bit more. So our moderator is Stephen, who kicked off our event. I'm going to let him take over. Are you all ready to roll?
I am.
There we go. All right. Thank you. I'll be here if you need anything.
All right. Well, that was a very interesting panel. Thanks to all the first group of panelists, and I'm very excited to get this group together. Some of them know each other already, some of them don't. And I know they're all going to have very interesting thoughts. So I think we should start with introductions. For me, as you know, I let it off. I'm Steve Siegel. I'm at Q10 Lutz Financial Services. But let's hear more from going around the table. Tell us your name, or the virtual table, I should say. Tell us your name, your role, and the most millennial thing you've done during the pandemic. So why don't we start with Torie?
Perfect. Thanks, Stephen. My name is Torie Mannix. Hi, everyone. I'm a senior vice president at Plant Moran Real Estate Investment Advisors. We're an affiliated entity. We're basically the real estate arm of Plant Moran, which is one of the largest accounting and business advisory firms in the U.S. I've been with Plant Moran REIA for about 8 years now. I lead our consulting practice. I spent a lot of my time in kind of the development and finance realm, a lot in Detroit as well. The most millennial thing I have done, I was going to say that I made an Instagram account for my dog, but that was way too embarrassing. So I guess like a lot of other people in our age group, I had to push my wedding back not once, but twice. So we're still really milking that engagement period.
Very good. How about John?
Sure. Hey guys, John Curry. I founded Crestlight Capital. I was formerly at Blackstone and managed a third of their U.S. office portfolio. I was in New York for 12 years, and basically went to them with an investment thesis that they thought was too small for them. So decided to kind of start it on my own with a laptop and a cell phone. All we buy is office properties, and we're going to have 400 million of AUM in a little under 4 years, and we have about 4 people on our team now. But I actually moved my family from New York. We were there for 12 years and moved back to Detroit because both me and my wife are from suburbs of Detroit, and you only get one chance to raise your kids, and you might as well do it around family. And I'm on a plane all the time, so I don't feel guilty when my kids are with their grandparents and all their cousins.
Great. And we will look forward to hearing from John. How about Chase?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Chase Cantrell. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit in Detroit called Building Community Value. I actually founded the org about 5 years ago after leaving the practice of law. So I'm a corporate and real estate lawyer by training, was at Dyke & McGossett. Building Community Value helps Detroit residents to learn the skills of real estate development. So we have training courses every year, as well as ongoing technical assistance for those who want to do development in their neighborhoods.
And what's the most millennial thing you've done during the pandemic, Chase?
Most millennial thing
and we
that
need
I've
John's
done.
answer too.
Probably, using tech to stay in contact with friends and family. So, Zoom birthdays, probably the most millennial thing.
John?
Thanks, Chase. Yeah, I almost forgot that. I don't know if it's really millennial, but I've kind of like just given up when you're on these Zoom calls, and I let my kids come in and they get to wave and participate with some of our bigger investors. And the New York funds really appreciate that. I'll tell you that much.
It's a great money raising tool. Yes.
It actually is. It gives the personal side.
That's good. Yeah. Mr. Friedman?
I'm Jared Friedman. I'm a director of opportunities at Friedman. I've been with the company for about 4 years. Prior to that, I was in Chicago in the real estate PE space for 5 years. I focus on I run our acquisitions group and our institutional advisory group. For those of you who don't know, Friedman, we're a full service owner operator in about 21 states. We have about 16 million square feet of commercial assets and 20,000 multifamily units under management in our portfolio. The most millennial thing I did was I ordered a Nintendo Wii so I could play Mario Kart. Played a couple times, and I'm clearly not as good as I used to be, but that was probably the most millennial thing I did over the pandemic.
Epic.
Who's your character of choice there, Jared?
Oh, come on. I mean, well, I'm a big Luigi guy because I feel like he's always been the underdog. So, I played pretty well with him. So, we'll see how it goes next year.
Love it.
Sam, I don't know about your Mario Kart skills, but tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning, everybody. Sam Hamburger. I am the Vice President of Acquisitions at Bedrock in Detroit. Been with the company for about 8.5 years, started there straight out of school. And it's just been a great experience for me just to get, some unbelievable exposure over the last 8.5, 9 years in Detroit. Obviously, a lot has been happening, not just downtown, but kind of in the city as a whole. I would say most millennial thing I've done over the last 9 months or so would be probably driving around the country once or twice and checking out some national parks and taking advantage of the opportunity to work remote. So.
Very good, very good. So now we've met our panel. Let's get to some of the details. So this first question would be for Torie or Sam, and then we'll take it from there. Since you guys both see a lot of deals, particularly in downtown Detroit, tell us what's going on in the market today, and if there's been any material changes in project underwriting as a result of the pandemic.
Sam, you want me to kick off?
Yeah, go ahead and I'll jump in.
Yeah, so I mean, it's no secret at this point that, there's been a lot of significant development investment recently in Detroit. It's led to a huge jump in just the value of commercial property as a whole. You've seen a lot of demand from different users pretty much across every asset class, rising market rents, especially in multifamily. Actually, I think the DEGC released a figure recently. They looked at 45 different projects that came across their desk since 2013 as a survey. And their stat was 26% increase in multifamily rents just from those projects alone. So clearly there's, a ton of growth and interest in the city. But I still think, there's been kind of a trend recently of a lot of exciting projects that have been announced that might still look like vacant lots or kind of boarded up buildings recently. And I think that, coupled with disruptions from the pandemic, there's been a little bit of a trend of, delayed projects or stalled projects. And so I think a lot of that, the biggest contributor, even pre-pandemic, was just increasing construction costs. That obviously impacts a developer's ability to have a successful project move forward, really impacts their return thresholds. And then on the other side of the scale, to balance those costs, you have the growth of multifamily rents that I think are starting to hit a little bit of a ceiling. You saw obviously a ton of growth for a while, but I think at some point, there's going to be a little bit of a slowdown there. We're in an interesting market, obviously, because if you look at the amount of people that can kind of afford to pay somewhere around $2,000 to $2,500 a month for a 1-bedroom in the Detroit area, it's not really that big of a pool to start with. And then on top of that, I think unlike some other urban cores, maybe like Chicago and New York, some bigger cities, you have a housing market nearby in Royal Oak, Ferndale, some other kind of smaller cities that are pretty affordable. And so I think a lot of people are making that decision between, should I invest in a starter home or, pay less for my monthly mortgage than maybe I would to rent downtown. I'm not saying that's the norm per se, but it's definitely something to consider. And so I think when you're looking at that pendulum, something that we've seen through these stall developments is just trying to get creative on, value engineering or finding areas to really lower those construction costs, getting creative there. Or, I think pretty much every project in Detroit has some sort of incentive that's layered into it as well. And so, I don't think anyone has the exact answer yet on how to kind of push some of these forward, but I think there has been a little bit of a change in some project underwriting and conservatism because of that.
Yes, you make excellent points. Sam, I think you see a lot of stuff as well. Do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I think when you look across the country, I think urban areas are probably seeing similar challenges, just given the pandemic, obviously, which is more so, over the last 9 to 12 months. But as Torie alluded to, you think about, okay, am I prepared to pay $2,000 or $2,500 a month for an apartment where, I'm going to be stacked on top of other people and left and right of other neighbors, where, you could probably get away with a mortgage payment that's significantly less than that, even if you want to tack on a condo fee somewhere out in the suburbs. And so you have this kind of challenge, I think, for people who are looking for a little bit more space, but also want the vibrancy of a city. And obviously, as of recently, that vibrancy isn't as prevalent in any urban market around the country, just with, forced restaurant and bar closures and retail limited occupancy, et cetera. So I think Detroit, actually, if you look nationally, is situated uniquely in the sense that you can be in a city, but you could also get a little bit more space because I think density is something that we've been working towards over the last 10 years. Whereas, cities like New York and Chicago, I think density is actually proving to be a little bit more problematic for people and is actually driving people out of those urban areas. So again, I think Detroit's kind of situated uniquely in that sense. From an office and even parking standpoint too, going back to kind of the initial question of underwriting, I think with all of the uncertainty in the market, understanding when office tenants are going to be back in the office full time or, several days a week at least, that obviously trickles down to parking demand pretty that's a pretty direct correlation. And so I think, it's pretty much a matter of time at this point until, from an underwriting standpoint, we could all make some assumptions that we feel comfortable with, without purely speculating. And so again, I think it's a matter of time. I think, that is why I think probably the office market, compared to whether it's industrial or multifamily, is potentially going to be a little slower to come back to life. And I'd probably put hospitality in that category too. It's just all of the uncertainty makes it very hard to look ahead more than 3, 6, 9 months, probably at the outside date.
Well, I know we're going to hear from John about the office market because he's been very active in that. But Chase, I wanted to ask you first, because you're doing stuff not necessarily in downtown Detroit, but in the neighborhoods where there's been more and more activity in the past 5 years. So tell us how the pandemic and the resulting the effects of it have affected your projects.
Sure. So I think that Torie and Sam actually make good points. So Torie mentioned that we might be getting towards a ceiling with the rental prices that we can assume in the greater downtown market. But we see in the neighborhoods that there's still a lot of movement in single family housing, especially in the city of Detroit. So if you think about the kind of stock that we have here in the city, which is over 70% of our housing units are single family homes, a lot of realtors and brokers who I speak to are talking about how the market in a lot of these hotter neighborhoods, if you think about the University District, Sherwood, Bagley, East English Village, et cetera, that those markets are still very strong. Also, just thinking about the context of Detroit, where you have, depending on who you talk to, up to 50,000 vacant units of single family in the city, there's just a lot of opportunity to continue to grow in those neighborhoods. So what I'm seeing is there are a lot of, especially Detroit residents, who are rolling up their sleeves and actually doing some of this rehab work in neighborhoods. And actually their profit margins in, again, those neighborhoods that I mentioned are actually pretty strong. So, what I'm seeing is that there's continued interest among those who want to do that single family work. Every time we have a training program, we always get many more applications than we have space for in our classes. And that hasn't waned during the pandemic at all. In fact, it's been very strong.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you for that. And Jared and John have been very active as well in terms of acquisitions, but not necessarily in the city of Detroit, outside and in various parts, not necessarily even in buying properties. So John, I'd like to hear you touch on the office market, as this is where your entire business is based around of, and you also just acquired a pretty big portfolio in Minneapolis, correct?
Yeah, that's right, Steve. So I think just like what we talked about a lot, and I think Sam and Torie and Chase all made awesome points that, I don't need to rehash, but I think really like a lot of some of the fundamentals in certain asset categories haven't been touched at all, actually are strengthening. So like industrial and multifamily nationally are stronger in a lot of places, where obviously hospitality has been decimated and office has been hit pretty hard. We're very fortunate as a company because we have in our portfolio, we have 85 tenants, and we started the firm in 2017. So we were already late in the cycle, and we were just very we were very pointed in what we bought was all, like, to use a baseball analogy, was shooting for like singles and doubles, right? Instead of swinging for the fences and try to hit a home run. So all of our properties were very well leased, with long weighted average lease term, with credit-based tenants, with rents that were below market. So we have 85 tenants, 84 have all paid rent. We don't have a lease expiration that's over 10,000 square feet in the next 3 years. So we have no legacy issues. And we're just lucky in the fact that none of the industries that our tenants are in were directly affected by COVID. They're not like energy or travel or entertainment or things like that. So that was luck. But so we're really just focused on finding where there's pain in the system and where you can kind of pounce on finding things at discount. The problem is there's so much liquidity out there right now, and there's so few amount of deals. And if you don't need to sell right now, why would you? So unless someone's forced to sell because of a loan maturity issue or lease issue or something like that, they're not selling. There are a few exceptions that we're finding here and there. I'd say what we've done, we actually just closed on a 4-acre, 4-building, 250,000 square foot brick and timber campus just over the Mississippi River in downtown Minneapolis. Mid-rise product, kind of what Sam was alluding to earlier. Like a lot of people are sensitive with, the vertical transportation with social distancing. So that was a property that we actually bid on a year ago, and then we got second place on, and the winner ended up falling out of contract in COVID. And then the seller kind of came back to us, and we ended up getting it for a 23% discount from the price we were willing to pay a year ago. And we bought that with a fund that's based out of Alabama. And, really it's a repositioning play with rents that are massively below market, but it's kind of like, to use another sports analogy, like a hockey analogy, it's where the puck is going in Minneapolis. It's on the outer fringe of downtown. So a lot of these urban cores in any major city with high-rise towers, and given what's going on with retail, are very, very quiet. But we're seeing a lot more activity in the office market right now, particularly in suburban nodes and in the outer fringes of downtown and more mid-rise product. So that's what this is. And Minneapolis actually has been very active, and we like it for a lot of reasons. 19 Fortune 500 companies, population that's growing, a very strong med tech industry, and there's actually been like 1 million square feet of absorption in downtown Minneapolis since the shutdowns. So and that's like companies like Microsoft took 30,000 square feet. There's another software company that took 100,000 square feet and new to the market, right? So I think that's going to continue, and I think just to put everything in perspective for people is COVID is a temporary issue, right? It's obviously I don't know when it's gonna, if there's gonna be a V-shaped recovery or when all these vaccines get distributed to the country, but that is our view, and we're taking a bet right now, and we're actually doubling down because we think eventually that this gets changed, and there's an ability to benefit from that when a lot of people are scared because all the headlines are people are going to say, hey, everyone's working from home, people aren't going to go back to the office. Well, that can't be further from the truth. Yes, there's a percentage of the population in back house or back of house office or back office workers that will not return to the office, but you can't create culture, you can't train new employees, and you can't collaborate when everyone's working on Zoom all the day, right? You need to be able to be in meetings together, and companies realize that. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these tech firms that are telling, that are immediately told their employees, hey, work from home until next summer because people can't figure out childcare, but then they're taking more space at cheaper rents because they know eventually they're gonna have to bring people back. So it's kind of a tale of two cities. Like the Class A properties will benefit more than Class B properties, and that the dichotomy between those two was already widening, and it's only exacerbated because of COVID. So that was a very long-winded answer, and Jared's probably got a lot more.
No, but I think I think that's very important that you said all that, because obviously our media is based around clickbait headlines, and people just assume the office is going to be dead. And I've talked about this with you and other people, and you really do miss out on the collaboration, and things are just not the same when you're working from home. And I've had people ask me, and other people can give me their thoughts on this, of course, as well. But people assume that as a young person, you're happy working from home and you don't really want to go into the office. But I totally disagree. I think that, you want to be able to collaborate, you want to be able to see people. And what I generally hear from most individuals is that they want to have a component of being able to go into an office. So, I'm sure we'll touch more on that, but it's good to hear that you are doubling down on office acquisitions and the reasons why. And I think it's very educational. So Jared, your group has also been active, but in a slightly different space. So why don't you tell us about what you guys have been working on the past year?
Yeah, definitely. And I echo a lot of thoughts that, both you and John have to say about office and working remote, right? I mean, we've been in the office. I'm probably the only one, I think, in the office right now on the panel, but we've been in the office since May, and I can't imagine being home for that period of time. And it's really helped our productivity. We've been really successful throughout the rest of 2020. And in 2021, we feel like we have an advantage a little bit because we've been in the office and been active. And so I don't think the office is going away by any means. But in terms of acquisitions, we're historically been a distressed, opportunistic investor. And we really, to John's point, haven't seen a ton of distress yet. There's a lot of capital out there chasing deals, probably more than there was pre-COVID. Interest rates have come down, so cap rates in some asset classes, including multifamily and industrial, have compressed, which is weird when you think about it, right? So we haven't seen a ton of distress yet, really because a lot of banks, special servicers have really not put pressure on their borrowers like in previous cycles to foreclose or to figure out something with their capital stack, right? So we've shifted a little bit in our strategy. We've actually been buying a lot of debt. We like the multifamily and industrial space a lot because, as John mentioned, the fundamentals have actually improved. Multifamily has seen a tick down of about 100 basis points in occupancy and rent growth about -1% a year over year, which is not that bad considering everything going on in the world. Industrial net absorption is positive across the market, all markets in 2020. And you are seeing some new construction, but for the most part, demand is outpacing supply. So we like those sectors a lot. So as I mentioned, we bought some distressed debt. We've been playing a lot early in 2020 in the securitized multifamily space. We bought a couple big, large loan pools there, encumbering about 50 assets. Like that risk reward trade a lot when the capital markets were upset there. We also closed on a mezz piece encompassing 1,200 units down in Florida last month. Once again, in the multifamily space, really like that risk reward profile there. We closed on a traditional multifamily deal late last year as well here locally. So really been investing a lot, both in the equity and debt side in the multifamily space. In the industrial space, we've been investing a lot in land. So we have a whole build to suit business, which has actually been really, really strong throughout 2020. And we think it's going to be strong going into 2021. So we have about 200 acres under our portfolio right now that's ready for build to suit here in Michigan, from Van Buren to Auburn Hills to Newport to Ecorse. We have several 50 plus acre sites, including some smaller sites spread around the metro for build to suit. So we see those two sectors coming, having the most absorption out of COVID. And that's where we've really been spending our time. We do think there'll be some distressed opportunities in the office space, in the retail space, but we just haven't seen the risk reward there yet. And also too, if you've been playing in the hotel space, which we don't that much, there's a ton of opportunities to invest in there. That's where you're starting to see the most opportunities, in my opinion, in terms of capitulation, in terms of price, and really able to buy some distressed debt, some distressed REO assets. So that's where most of it's been. But real estate always has a lag, right? So real estate always lags 12 to 18 months behind the capital markets. So you'll start to see that distress probably later in 2021, early 2022 for some real interesting opportunities there.
Yeah, I think you bring up the fact that you guys are buying distressed debt and mezz pieces and securitized pieces. I think that's not very common in this market. So for our younger people watching, what are the mechanics behind that, and how do you find those opportunities?
There's not like a set market, right? But in the securitized space, right? So if everyone watched the movie The Big Short, right? A lot of real estate loans are securitized, right? And go into different pools. And so those trade in very obscure ways. Just kind of given some connections we have and some relationships we have, we're able to source, a good amount of those opportunities. You can trade different parts of capital stacks. You can trade, they're not on exchanges like stocks or anything like that. They kind of trade in off-market scenarios, but that's where we really found a lot of those opportunities in trading there. And back in March, April, May, you could buy the most risky piece on a Freddie K piece bond, which encompasses about 100 multifamily mortgages for 30-40% discount of where they were trading pre-COVID, which was just unbelievable when you think about it. And all the underlying assets were as secure as can be, right? Class A multifamily stuff. So we're yielding, 32 to 37% on some of those pieces today because they've come back. We've flipped out of a couple as well too. So that was probably the best risk reward arbitrage I saw all last year in the real estate space. You just don't have that impact that happens on the actual real estate side. Unfortunately, the bad news about that market is as fast as it went down, as fast as it came back up. So all those opportunities are gone. And a lot of those Freddie K pieces and securitization pieces are actually trading above par now, which is crazy when you think about it. So that came and went, as hot as it came. So it's unfortunate, but a little bit of background on that.
Hey, Jared, quick question. Sorry, Steve. Quick question, Jared. No, when you guys are looking at those debt deals and opportunities, how would you compare what you're seeing in Class A multifamily to Class B, let's say, which I assume is what you were more so looking at from an acquisition standpoint, kind of in the Detroit metro area? Since you just touched on, many of them were Class A and are now kind of back to stabilization in a sense. How do you see the shift when you look from Class A to Class B or even, B, C?
Yeah, so in our portfolio, we have about 20,000 multifamily units. And what we saw pre-COVID across the board, we were collecting about 94 to 95% of rents on a monthly basis. Today, that's gone down to about 89% in terms of monthly collections. So you've seen a 600 basis point decrease across the board. The Class A has not had a lot of decrease. You've probably seen 100 to 300 basis points, depending on the environment, decrease in collections. And the Class C workforce housing has really absorbed most of that decrease in collections. So you've been seeing a lot of delinquencies in that Class C, I call it workforce housing space. That's really where we've seen the most issues. Now, what's funny is even though you've seen a ton of issues from that space from a collection standpoint, we think it's short-term in nature. A lot of residents are having rent strikes at their properties, right? So we have a couple properties in our portfolio where 40% of the tenants don't pay because they're literally picketing like a union because they don't think they have to pay rent because the moratorium on evictions is still in place, right? So in Indianapolis, for example, you can't evict tenants because there's a moratorium. We think that's going to go away. Right now it's slated for January 31st. Maybe gets kicked with the new stimulus bill that potentially come out. But eventually when that happens, that'll kind of self-correct itself. But even though you have collections in that space, as John mentioned earlier, the amount of capital looking to invest in workforce housing is abundant. So you're not seeing a very large pricing difference on the equity side, if at all, which is why the debt pieces, when they traded at a discount, became a little bit more attractive. So it's kind of interesting to see the dynamic, but cap rates have compressed. I mean, interest rates were super low, driven down by the Fed, and are probably going to stay that way. I don't see multifamily pricing changing very much to the downside at all, just because the abundance of capital out there.
Yeah, I mean, I just to kind of close this out, I think collections is one thing, occupancy is another thing, and kind of that sustained occupancy. I feel like just based on my general read of the market, when you look at Class A multifamily, that is the group, the people in those units are the people who say, or who may say, okay, I'm paying $2,500 a month, as we touched on kind of at the beginning. Why not just go buy a house or a condo where I could actually build equity versus, putting monthly rent to somebody else's pocket. So collections, whereas, maybe you see a few percentage points drop, across the board, occupancy, and anybody else can touch on this too. I'm wondering if over time, as leases start to expire, I think that forces the question to people of, do I want to stay in an apartment building or should I go buy a place, especially in that Class A realm where, you probably can afford to buy a place if you're looking for some longer term stability.
Well, look at what's happening with residential homes in the close inner burbs of major cities, right? Like any of my friends that lived in New York City or Chicago or San Francisco and name the city, even parts of here, right, residential home prices are booming because people are trying to get out of the cities for what this is, especially people with kids, right? And just what's going on with education. So the question is are those long-term trends or are those short-term trends, right? And when is this is not a direct parallel in any way, shape, or form, right? Like totally different issues. I'm just saying, if you look at what happened at 9/11, after the terrorists hit the towers, high-rise pricing for any major city in the U.S. plummeted, right? And then 2 years later, it was back to normal. I'm not saying that's what's going to happen here because this is a totally different issue. But it is temporary in nature. So you have to think about what are going to be the long-term effects.
And I think you both bring up great points. And what's interesting in that decrease in occupancy that you've seen across the country right now, you can actually pinpoint less than 10 markets across the country that have taken up a large amount of that decrease in occupancy. You look at downtown San Francisco, you look at downtown New York, you look at these major metropolitan areas, right? In New York right now, you can go get a 12-month apartment, okay? Probably at a discount to where it was trading COVID, and you can get 2 months free rent in concessions, okay? If you look at all the equity REITs, you look at equity residential, you look at assets property trust, they're still down 30 to 40% of their share price of where they were pre-COVID, largely because of the occupancy and rent decreases. So I think John, to your point, and Sam, to your point, it's very market by market specific. It's very asset class specific, and it's probably temporary in nature. But yeah, a lot of those occupancy decreases are very concentrated in these urban metros with high prices that just are experiencing this potential short-term, maybe potentially long-term shift in the way people think about how they want to live.
Yeah, and just like this should hopefully be Detroit's time to shine, right? Like smaller markets, more affordable markets. Like people are considering, like, why am I spending, like, we're talking about, you guys are talking about $2,000, $2,500 a unit, right, in downtown Detroit, versus like you go to New York or San Francisco, it's at least double that, right, for the same quality unit. So like people are like, what am I paying for when they want to be closer to family? And that's it. I think you're looking at a lot of these trends, and the capital is flowing there across, and Jared knows this very well, all across the Sun Belt, right? Like all these towns like Atlanta and Charlotte and Dallas and Austin and Nashville, they're all booming because it's more affordable and it's cheaper labor and et cetera, et cetera.
And John, I think they've also been quicker to reopen. So I tend to agree with you in the sense that, people are willing to, and I think to date have been willing to pay a premium to be in those urban areas because they can surround themselves with the best bars, restaurants, nightlife, public space. And with a lot of that shut down in these major cities in a real way, I would tend to agree that, it probably in the spring, summer, as hopefully things start to reopen, I think people will be pretty quick to go sign that lease back in that downtown area to surround themselves with all the activity.
Well, that was very, very fascinating. Sam, I want to stay with you because you guys had a pretty big acquisition last year with the SOCT campus. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that acquisition and the motivations and thought process behind the investment?
Yeah, so I know we've touched on already the fact that, industrial is presumably in a pretty good place right now in terms of momentum and demand. And we've been studying at Bedrock kind of the business case behind industrial for the last year or so. And so when the SOCT opportunity came to light, and Jared can touch on this too, we worked very closely kind of throughout the process. It was kind of a perfect fit within the business case that we were studying. And so, it's not only the specific location of that site, kind of right at the footsteps of the future Gordie Howe Bridge, which obviously has, implications for imports and exports and distribution with access to Canada. We really feel like we've seen over the last year and a half, the demand for move-in ready industrial space in the Detroit market has remained extremely high, and there's very little supply that is move-in ready. And so the site, for those of you who don't know, it's 37 acres. There's about 600,000 square feet of built square footage, the vast majority of which is move-in ready. And so you have move-in ready industrial space. You have some kind of 70s, 80s vintage industrial space that probably will take a little bit of work to get up to date. And then there's also an opportunity to build ground up on the site as well. And so the site generally and the opportunity from a timing standpoint, I think really worked with where we were in our process of studying that business case. And we feel like it really affords the opportunity to not only have some move-in ready industrial space, but also some longer term development opportunities. And, from our perspective at Bedrock, it's bringing jobs to the market in a neighborhood that we feel like has a lot of opportunity in a great location when you think about industrial and access to highways and train tracks, et cetera. And it gives us an opportunity to satisfy the demand of, some major companies who, if we sign a lease with company X, it'll make a big splash in the market and really kind of reverberate for months and potentially years to come. And so, it kind of checked all the boxes as far as we're concerned. And I would expect us to continue poking around the industrial vertical, in the near term and midterm for sure, especially in Detroit.
And I'll just add quickly, I got to give, Sam, you and your team and Bedrock a lot of kudos because that actually was a distressed opportunity, right? So SOCT was a former automotive company. They went bankrupt, went back to a receiver in the court system. we were appointed to sell the building, right? So Bedrock was the perfect logical buyer to take advantage of a distressed opportunistic opportunity from a former BK automotive company, and one of the best companies around suited to retransform that to bring back the jobs to the community. So it was an interesting opportunity and a hot asset class with that distress component to really take advantage of an opportunity that otherwise, probably wouldn't be there in a location like that.
Well, that we've been getting pretty granular on the analysis point of view. Let's zoom out a little bit, as we have a lot of young professionals watching, and you all have had very interesting career paths. Some of you have stayed with your same companies since you left college, like Sam and Torie, and some of you have gone out on your own, like John and Chase. So Chase, why don't you tell us about your journey into starting your own firm, and as well as the other community-oriented ventures you've become involved in?
Sure. So as I mentioned at the top, I started off as a lawyer. I'm still licensed, but no longer practice. But in the real estate group at a large firm, and it was an interesting time. I actually started practicing in 2008, the month of the crash. So as you can imagine, most development was drying up in Detroit. Banks weren't lending. Developers were in a lot of distress. So as things began to come back, a lot of interesting development projects, Broderick Tower, David Stott Building, Old Free Press Building, the Auburn. So got a chance to just understand how fragile our market was in Detroit at that time. And just how complicated the capital stacks were to actually make these deals work. So if you think about Broderick Tower, we had every possible subsidy in that deal that you can possibly imagine. So over the time and working at that firm, I began to realize that, we're in a city that is 90% Black and brown. Most of our clients didn't reflect me or my community. And I began to ask myself this question about, we're seeing how residents are perceiving development in their communities. Even in greater downtown and spilling out, we talk about development happening to Black Detroiters rather than Black Detroiters feeling as though they're in the development ecosystem themselves. So I decided to step away from Dykema to actually start the nonprofit Building Community Value to, again, recognize the fact that there are Detroiters who are interested in doing development work and giving them the tools to do that work themselves. What's been interesting on this side of it is, again, working in neighborhoods, we think about the fact that there's still a fragile market in greater downtown. If you look at deals that are happening now, there's still a lot of subsidy that are going into these deals. You still need tax abatements. You still need subsidy from the MBDC and MSHDA, and et cetera. So when you head into the neighborhoods to try to rebuild our corridors, I'm working on an 8,000 square foot rehab right now, single story, commercial, should be a simple deal. There are 6 loans in the deal, new market tax credits, DGC loans, everything that you can imagine to make the transaction work. And it's an 8,000 square foot building. So, essentially what I've been trying to work on is helping other, Detroiters through these kinds of processes to understand how they interact with the city, how they interact with lenders. And again, we're trying to get creative in these corridors, which is why you see things like the Strategic Neighborhood Fund that's trying to inject creative capital into these structures to make these neighborhood deals work. So it's still a challenge out there for a lot of these deals. And during COVID, we do still see that construction is happening, but the challenge is still persistent in terms of lending.
I saw Torie nodding in agreement with a lot of what you said, particularly about the DGC, and I would call it soft money. I think that's the correct term, but you can correct me if I'm wrong, Torie. But besides hearing about your journey at Plan, I'd like to also hear about your involvement with these type of soft money sources, because I believe that's a lot of what you consult on.
Yeah, I spend a lot of my time, and even more recently, it's not a typical workout deal per se, but spending a lot of time looking at some of these developments that have stalled and helping to rework them a little bit. A lot of that comes from the debt side, the construction side, but then obviously in Detroit, a big piece of that is the incentive side. Soft money is a great term, Stephen, but I think about 95% of US cities offer at least some incentive for economic development, whether it's for job growth or real estate or you name it. And don't quote me on this stat, but I think since 2013, again, the city of Detroit for every single development except for the casinos has given some sort of incentive to move projects forward. And so that's obviously been a huge, I'll call it a little bit of consternation too, when you start to look at some of these bigger projects like Little Caesars Arena, the Ford Corktown project that get a lot more light on them as far as receiving some of this soft money. It's kind of a give and take. It's the community that maybe doesn't want to see some of these bigger corporations receiving soft dollars, but then it's really the reality is a lot of these projects won't happen without them. And so we spend a lot of time going through that and layering in the capital stack and really understanding how those impact the project and how to move forward.
And why don't we stay with you, since you've stayed at one firm since college, since you graduated from college, and now you're in a position of hiring people. So tell us about how you've risen so far at such a young age and such a compressed timeline. And now that you're in a position of hiring people, what do you look for in young associates?
Yeah, Plant Moran's a really interesting place. And it's a really great place for younger people looking to grow their career because there's a pretty well-established program for career paths and growth to begin with. Plant Moran's been around for 95 years on the accounting and tax side. And so when you start to look at Plant Moran Real Estate Investment Advisors more specifically, coupled with Plant Moran Crest, our sister company, it's about 90 people. And we really, we continue to be at a huge exponential growth phase. When I started at the company, there was 40 people. Obviously at 90, we've more than doubled. And so there's a lot of room to really blaze your own path and be entrepreneurial and look at ways to kind of get your foot in the door and grow quickly. At the same time, you have kind of that structure from the larger Plant Moran realm. I think for younger people trying to break into the business, there's, I wouldn't say there's a lot of entry-level positions in Detroit, specifically in the real estate market. I think a lot of people that get involved in real estate maybe have some background in it, or they saw their family do it or something along those lines. And so, one thing that I tell people that are starting at Plant Moran is you really just need to have kind of that entrepreneurial spirit to figure things out yourself. Commit to kind of like self-teaching, self-learning, while asking questions along the way, of course. But if you aren't an advocate for yourself and, kind of show true curiosity and how to grow it as an individual, it's more than likely that others that have the ability to advance you in more of a corporate type setting won't invest time in you either. I think if you're a sponge, you can learn from other people, you can find that mentor that can kind of push you ahead. There's also a wealth of programs out there from, Georgetown and other places like that have 2-year kind of real estate development programs that you can go into now for kind of that book learning. But at the same time, there's really no experience like street experience and kind of digging your hands in and getting in there too. So it's just getting your foot in the door somewhere. And then from there, really just being an advocate for yourself and pushing through.
Right.
I think last thing about Detroit, it's a small market. Like I said, it's a huge advantage for young people. You can get yourself on major projects like Little Caesars Arena, City of Royal Oak development at a really young age. Other markets, you might have to wait a little bit longer. Maybe you never get on stuff like that. So again, self-advocate.
Yeah, I think everything you said is very true. It's one of the advantages of our market that you can get involved. If you can find a way in, you can get involved on bigger projects very early. I went to the Eric Lutz School of Real Estate where he yelled at me for 2 years while I learned about real estate, and that was a very productive way. So, and Jared, I know you are now helping run a second generation firm. So, what do you look for in young people?
Yeah, I basically look for 3 things in everybody we hire. And I don't care if they know anything about real estate. That's like the least important thing, right? Hardworking. I like people that get in the office early, stay late, put in those extra hours, right? It's really important, especially when you're learning, something new. I really like detail, right? So like everything we do in real estate, super detailed, right? So like to your numbers, to the way you present things. Like, just make sure it's right. You know, I learned that at a very young age. You know, working, you know, throughout my career, you got to be detailed. And then finally, curiosity is probably the number one thing I look for. I love people that ask a bunch of questions, curious, so on and so forth, because you can learn anything. I mean, real estate is not hard. It's like really simple, actually, when you think about it. You got some income coming in, you pay out some expenses, and everything else, you know, is pretty straightforward thereafter. So as long as someone asks good questions and has good detail, that's really what we work for. And I echo a lot of sentiment that Torie has. You know, there's a lot of opportunities in Detroit. You just got to be curious and find them, and so on and so forth. So,
John, I especially want to hear from you about this, because you obviously have an institutional background, as does Jared actually, but you came back from New York working at Blackstone, and now you're here and you've tried to hire people, you've looked for people. So I think you have a lot of interesting points to add here about our labor market and in general about our market overall.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, first of all, I think Jared and Torie hit it out of the park. I echo everything they say. I think just a couple of things I would add about like hiring people. If you get 95% on a test in school and you do that all the time, you are a straight A 4.0 student. If you get 95%, you know, building the Little Caesars or doing a project that you're buying for $100 million, you are losing someone millions of dollars. So like the thing that you need to realize when you step into the real world is like you need to be 100% all the time. And people are going to make mistakes, and everyone makes mistakes, and you need to own up to that. But I think what really makes someone like separates people is kind of what they were talking about, the curiosity, inquisitiveness, because you don't want to make the same mistake twice. And I think a really big thing is just being a problem solver, because problems happen all the time. And like, of course, like someone can just say, here's the problem, but it's the person who can say, here's the problem, and here's what I would do. That's the person who's going to be really successful. So I think those are just some of the things I would add to what Jared and Torie already said. With regards to the labor market here, I mean, listen, I love Detroit. I mean, there's a reason I had my wedding here. I moved back here because I have a lot of nostalgia and all that stuff. But the labor market, at least from the commercial real estate standpoint, from an institutional standpoint, and Jared, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. It's pretty challenging. And the reason being is people don't have the training that they have in other major markets. They just don't have the reps, right? Like I guess when you work like coming out of school and you get a first year analyst position, a lot of, you know, private equity funds, and, you know, you can like TPG, Blackstone, Starwood, like the list goes on and on. Those people are seeing a ton of deal flow, and everything that Jared was talking about, looking at mezz debt, or looking at being a lender, or doing all those different, there's a lot of different opportunities where they see a lot of different reps. Whereas here in Detroit, I totally agree with what Torie's saying, that like you get a lot of exposure really quickly, but there's less projects, right? So there's not as many reps. So trying to take someone who's got 2 years of experience, we've had to actually go to other markets. Like we've had to pick people from New York or pick people from Chicago and transplant them here. And I think really what it comes down to is it's all a race of talent, right? Like you look at like almost any market or any type of industry, like what you're competing for is to get the best talent. And I for one, again, I'm ignorant to say this, but I think we need to get better in Detroit of like expanding outside of just the auto industry and recruiting better talent. We have great engineering crop, but we need to get better at the real estate.
Well, I know Chase and I talked about this in our conversations before, so I think you have some points to add here as well.
Sure. So what's interesting about the Detroit market is, especially for the larger developers, if you're going into community, you're going to community meetings, you're going to city council meetings, you're going to advocate on behalf of the developer for whom you work. There's oftentimes a lot of pushback from community members because, again, you know, I talked a little bit about the perception of what development is in a city like Detroit. So, you know, I've been able to grow building community value. When I look for people who I hire, it's also folks who not only have an interest in the transaction, on the transactional side, you know, creating the deal, building the deal, people who love capital stacks, love pro formas, et cetera, but also folks who are thinking critically about the impact that real estate has on the physical and built environment and people. So people who are thinking about, if you are buying a distressed property, you know, what does that mean to have a distressed property in a community? What's the impact on that community and the people who live there? How do we talk to that community? How do we interface with them? How do we empathize with them in a certain way to make the deal even stronger. So it's building relationships with the people who live in or around the developments that we're doing. And usually that is a soft skill that I'm looking for when I'm thinking about who I'm hiring. Because in fact, whether you're working for a community development organization, a nonprofit, or if you're working for a large developer, those soft skills are actually very useful when you're trying to get a development through a process.
Right. And Jared, I know we wanted to hear from you about this as well, because you're involved on the transaction side in terms of selling, but also because of your institutional background, you're very in depth on financial analysis. So how do you see the labor market here?
Yeah, I think John brings up a good point. A lot of people don't have the reps, right? And so like if you go into any financial institution in New York, Chicago, so on and so forth, and if you don't know Argus, you won't get a job, right, as a financial analyst anywhere. And if you don't have 3, 4, 5 years of experience doing that, you really won't. And we don't have a lot of talent here. And so you do bring up a good point, John, there. We definitely lack that. I think we started to see, though, a nice influx of younger folks and millennials who did live out of state, starting to move back. I think that I'm kind of hoping that some of those folks will continue to do that, because, we're always looking to add great people to the team. And I really think that that's going to be a driving force, hopefully, as this kind of suburban migration happens, that some of these folks say, you know what, New York was great, Chicago was great, so on and so forth, but I really want to get back home to Detroit, because we do need more people who are in depth with, different asset classes, capital stacks, different type of developments around the world, right? I mean, Sam and his team at Bedrock, when you guys were building things in Detroit, you were kind of leading the charge, first frontier and how to do things and really, take on. There was no way of doing things historically, right? It was kind of all a new template, right? But across the country, in San Francisco and all over the place, there's that template of how to do things. And so I think a lot of people can bring, from the outside into Detroit, a lot of value just for different projects that have gone on across the country, different ideas, different ways of value engineering, so on and so forth. So I hope the labor market does improve here, because I think we could always use, more bright young individuals in Detroit. But yeah, you all bring up great points in terms of, how the world is here in Detroit. So
yeah, I think we should actually all team together, to be honest, and come up with some pull better labor pool and share it, because I get when you're competing in business, people have sharp elbows, right? But this is actually a market-wide problem that we can solve together. And a lot of people that have great ideas at all of the companies you work with all are sharing the same concern, right? So it's something that we should, I think actually the younger generation of us should collaborate with that.
Yeah, and John and Jared too, I think, if I think about my team at Bedrock, I've got one guy from LA, another from St. Louis, and those kind of came to fruition in different ways. But I think it's really up to us, John, as you alluded to basically be proactive and put some tentacles out there, because I think we have a pretty compelling story to tell in Detroit. And when you think of even entry-level people, the young generation these days, they're all looking to find an opportunity to make an impact as quickly as possible. And so it's not only a good opportunity to get your feet wet in Detroit and get those reps, but also be a part of something much bigger than just, the company that they're working for. So I think we do have the benefit of that narrative. And, we've, I think, been increasingly successful at Bedrock and our family of companies in bringing in outside talent, leveraging that narrative and getting people excited and going out and grabbing them and pulling them to Detroit versus, sitting and waiting for somebody to knock on our door from West Coast, East Coast, wherever it may be.
Yeah, and
right.
One thing that Jared kind of hit on a little bit earlier, I think you just have to get a little bit more creative here with your hiring strategy versus some other markets. You're probably not going to, if you just look for people with experience in real estate in Detroit, it's going to be a very small pool. But I think, our philosophy is you find really smart people that are intuitive and committed and want other opportunities. Maybe they're at Deloitte in the audit practice, maybe they're a GM in the financial analysis practice and they've never done real estate, but they're smart people. You find them, you bring them on, and you teach them the real estate skills. I think other markets like San Francisco, New York, you can find people in real estate that have a lot of reps, but here you just have to maybe twist your thinking a little bit.
Yeah, Jared made a statement earlier, which couldn't be more true. It's not that complicated of an industry. We're using, for the younger people that are listening, we're using Argus and these words that you may or may not know, but it's not that complicated. Like there's a lot of industries out there that you need to be a lot smarter in.
Yes, this is all very true. I think that essentially brings us to close. I haven't checked the Q&A. Let me see if we have any questions. Alex Bonda asked about the occupancy rates in Detroit multifamily relative to the rest of the country. Did we kind of answer that? Did someone come? Didn't we? Or no? Well, I mean, I haven't taken a look at this. Jared, you were kind of talking about this before. Do you have an idea?
Yeah. And Alex Bonda actually helped us finance one of our deals. So I got to give him a lot of credit last year. So, but yeah, actually Detroit's been holding up pretty well, so on and so forth. I think the multifamily market here actually holds up much better than other parts of the country. The reason is we have very little supply, right? So I was actually just looking at this morning. We've got a total inventory of apartments of 253,000 units. And as a percentage of our inventory, we're only building like 1 to 1.3% every year in terms of new deliveries, which is extremely low. If you look at Denver, Austin, Nashville, they get like to 3.5 to 4.5% of total inventory that they're delivering every year. And we have a massive MSA compared to those cities, right? So our supply levels are extremely low compared to the rest of the country, and demand has held up pretty well. So we've actually done pretty well. What's different this time about any other recession in the past, and I'm going to tout this for all of us, is the automotive industry is out of control on fire. Electric vehicles, self-driving cars, the whole thing. And this COVID, thing is actually helping the automotive companies because public transportation is decreasing, so on and so forth. I hope it lasts, but the automotive industry is healthy, which is fantastic because 9.5 times or 9.9 times out of 10, right? We're always like a big red flag from an institutional standpoint. No one wants to invest here because of the automotive industry. But this time around, I think we're proving people wrong. So I'm actually excited about that. And I think it'll bode well for real estate assets here.
All right. And with that, I guess I'll hand it back to Todd.
Hey, that was a great event. I have one thing to add, and just when you were talking about hiring people and building off of John. So I look at a guy like John, and he loves commercial real estate because he's able to say Minneapolis, north of the river, timber brick structure, is going to attract this kind of tenant. I hired somebody once a while ago who just didn't have a sense of direction. I was like, the building on 3rd and Hennepin, the 12-story building. And he's like, what are you talking about? You're never going to succeed in real estate. You got to love this stuff, right? We all probably could name 50 developers off the top of our head and what projects are going on where and stuff. So you kind of got to be a junkie if you really, really want to be successful. But hey, thanks everybody. Fantastic event. Thank our sponsors one more time. Here we go. Really appreciate your sponsorship and you're helping us get these things up and running and together. And this event will not happen online next year. I hereby solemnly swear I'm coming to Detroit. We're going to make this happen live and perhaps shake hands. See you all soon. Thanks again for your time, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Well, Todd, that's recorded, so we'll see you in person.
Right. I see. You have the bet down recorded, and I'll put it on YouTube. I won't cut this last bit out. I'll hold to it. I'm coming.
Thanks, guys.
See y'all.
Thanks.